Welcome to the Wednesday, June 11th, 2025 Planning Board meeting for the town of Raymond. The board will come to order. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call. Jackie?
Jackie Sawyer.
Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Mark Childs.
And Zoom.
Kevin Woodbury.
This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chair if you are unable to see or hear. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have a preliminary plan review from Brandon Chase, and followed by, for a subdivision, followed by a workshop for proposed new ordinances for a marijuana regulation and short-term rentals. And then that's it. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances or state law. All persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the microphone, state their name and address and affiliation with the application. All persons speaking shall address the chair, while any conversations must be held in abeyance until after the board has formally adjourned. After the board votes on the merits of each application, it will prepare a written notice of decision because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeals rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regard to a specific application not leave until the board has completed its discussion. Appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the Superior Court or as otherwise provided by law within 45 days of this board's decision. Okay, our first order of business, which I skipped over, is the approval of the minutes for April 9th, 2025.
Move to accept the minutes of April 9th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And one abstention.
Abstain.
Okay. All right. So first up is our the Brandon Chase 11-lot cluster subdivision known as Pine Ridge Estates. Before we get there, is everybody here for the short-term rentals? Is anybody here for the marijuana side of this? No one is here from the marijuana side. Okay, good. And the only reason why I say that is we, as a board, we have not come up with a draft for the marijuana ordinance yet, so we really have nothing to discuss. So as we did with the short-term rentals, if we get that far, the board will come up with a draft of where we are proceeding, a very rough draft, where we are proceeding with the marijuana regulations. And then at the following meeting, we would be then having a discussion from the community on that particular draft. If we get that far, again, it'll wind up as the short-term rental will get published on the town's website sometime before the meetings. You'll have an opportunity to read it and comment on it. Just as a reminder, that emails that you send to the board will appear under the correspondence section of the minutes, but we will not be responding to any of those. We'll read them, but we are not, by law, we're not allowed to respond to them because all of the conversation concerning projects, current projects, must be conducted at a public hearing so that everybody is transparent. Okay, with all that said, our first order of business is the preliminary subdivision plan review for the 11 cluster subdivision known as Pine Ridge. And Brett will walk us through the start.
Sure, thanks. I know the applicant and Andy, you're here tonight, so I won't steal your thunder. I know you got a presentation probably lined up. So just a high level, again, it's 11 lots for an open space subdivision located in the LRR2 district. The planner's memo just had a couple outstanding items, one of which they did provide supplementary information for, which was the test pit logs and information, and showing that on the plans. I think that was submitted last week, correct? Okay. So that addresses that comment outlined in our memo. Just a couple other housekeeping items listing the density calculations on the plans. I think there was, it had just shown deductions, and I think breaking that out would just help provide a little bit more clarity in terms of what those deductions actually are, if it's steep slopes, floodplain areas, wetland areas, resource protection zones, those sort of items. We also noticed during the review within the land use ordinance space standards that open space subdivisions require a 1.5 acre minimum lot size requirement. So we just make sure that that's shown on the plans. And then soils were good. And then just so that the board and the applicant are aware, I think easement documentation, like showing home ownership for the open space, private road, that sort of documentation will be needed during the final plan submission. But other than that, though, I think the application is ready to be deemed complete.
Okay. Who is presenting?
Good evening, Andy Morrill from BH2M. Brandon Chase, the applicant, is here as well. Brett, I appreciate you not taking my thunder there. That was great.
We'd love to hear it twice, too.
Right, exactly. None of us want that. So 37.3 acre parcel, limited residential recreation 2 zone. As the board knows, the applicant had come forward with a subdivision previously on this piece. That project did not move forward. We worked with Mark Hampton Associates to do wetlands, vernal pools, test pits, and septic designs. As the subdivision is currently proposed, we do not have any wetland impacts proposed. There were 3 non-significant vernal pools found on the parcel. We are not proposing any impacts to those. I do apologize, when we submitted our application, we did not have the test pit information as part of that. Soils people are pretty busy this time of year, so. We have subsequently submitted that information, so I think you guys have that. We are proposing an 11-lot cluster subdivision, of which 15.7 acres will be open space, proposing about a 1,467 linear foot road. Lots will be served by underground electric, subsurface wastewater, and drilled wells. Stormwater for the site is relatively simple. Open ditches on either side of the roadway, discharge to one of 2 soil filters. There's one soil filter in the center of the cul-de-sac, one down on lot 11 on the western limits of lot 11. The project does require a stormwater permit with the DEP because we're proposing over half an acre of impervious area. Our intent is to submit to the DEP here in the coming weeks. Once we've kind of addressed your first round of comments, we like to get your initial comments before we go to the DEP and not have to make significant changes when we go to the DEP. So that's our intention there. We did receive the town comments, appreciate that. I guess I agree that, I think there's some outstanding items, but I think they're pretty minor in nature. We will certainly add the deduction summary to the net residential density calculations. I think that makes a lot of sense. There was also a question of whether we could show the non-significant vernal pools on the plans. I'm happy to do that. For the board's information, those are on the back of lots 2 and 3 in those wet areas. We're not proposing any building or anything back there, but that's where those were located. Site distance along Raymond Cape Road, I'm happy to add that information. I will state that we designed the road in the most strategic location for site distance to maximize the site distance along Raymond Cape Road. But yes, I'm happy to add that to the plans. Nitrate analysis, I know that was one other item that was brought up. We are hoping the board would be willing to consider a waiver from the nitrate analysis requirements. The soils are very well draining, hydrologic soil group A, very well draining soils on site. The parcel is quite large. If you look at the sheet 1 of the plans, you can see on almost all of the lots, we're proposing septic systems in the front of the lots, which means they're ultimately in the interior of the parcel, not into the back of the lots near abutting wells and that type of thing. I think with the proximity to the abutting lots, I think that makes a lot of sense, but happy to have that discussion with the board. We will certainly provide homeowners documents as part of the final subdivision process. Also, as the fire chief had recommended, we'll give him auto turn calculations to show that the fire truck can accommodate his cul-de-sac. We designed that to the town standards, so I'm pretty confident it does, but I will certainly provide that information to him. And there was also a discussion about options for fire suppression. I believe the applicant is going to move forward with sprinkling the houses, so all 11 lots will be sprinkled as part of this subdivision. I will be sure to add a note to the plans moving forward that covers that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll throw it back to you. Happy to answer any questions. I do have copies of the new test pit data. If anyone wants that, I'm happy to give you guys a copy of that.
Okay. Let's see. So the plan has changed significantly from the sketch plan review.
Correct.
During the sketch plan review, the board chose to move ahead with an open space based upon that
Yes.
plan.
Yes.
So considering the fact that it has now changed significantly, the ordinance requires both an open space and a conventional to be reviewed. So I think that the first thing as a board we need to do is to consider whether or not we continue to want to go with an open space without reviewing the regular subdivision.
Oh, sure.
We did
I
that
think
last time.
Yeah, it makes a difference of one lot.
Yep.
Is
I have
that,
no problem with that.
I
You
mean,
okay?
It looks like the land that's in the open space, a lot of it has wetland sort of features to it, so
Yep.
it seems to make sense to leave that as open space.
okay? Kevin, you okay?
I concur with that.
All right. Yep, okay. All right. That's the first. Concerning the waiver, you've got to meet the requirements on 30 TAC 8.3 for the nitrate waiver. The board has not done nitrate waivers in the past, just so you
Okay.
know.
Okay. If it's something the board's not willing to consider, we'll provide it. I just wanted to have a discussion with the board
Okay.
to see what the board's thoughts were.
Yeah, well, I don't think that you would meet all of the requirements for a waiver anyway.
Then we'll do it.
Okay. All right. Questions from the board?
I guess I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
As you know, I like forests and managing forests, and you have some open space, which includes forests, and when you do the easement document, it'd be nice if you could provide some method of performing forestry operations on the open space without the homeowners association being able to disrupt it or make it difficult to do. I don't have any suggestions how to write that, but I'd ask you to give it some thought.
Okay. So I'm sorry, can you say that again? You'd like the...
The open space has some forest land.
Yep.
And it'd be nice to be able to manage that forest land.
Yep.
And if, I've dealt with forests that are owned by multiple people, and it can be difficult to do good forestry. If somehow you could address that through the homeowners association,
Okay.
it'd be nice.
Yep, I will...
And it'd be in compliance with the comprehensive plan.
okay.
That we
Yeah, we'll
like
take a
our
look at that.
resource, and we want to manage it the right way. Right, Peter?
I can't disagree with that.
You know, Brett, we might want to work on some standard language, because it does come up often. For,
For what?
yeah.
What he's
for
talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably look at some example projects that we've done and see if there's any, like resources like that that we can share.
Sure.
I had a question kind of about like the grading of this. If
Sure.
I recall it's kind of on a hill, right? Like,
Yes, it is.
Good slope to it.
It is.
And are these two catch basins, the drainage easements at the bottom, are those going to be sufficient to kind of catch the drainage coming off the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the majority of the stormwater is coming back to that soil filter that sits on lot 11. So we sized the ditches along the sides of the road to collect up to the 25-year storm event flowing down that hill and across those lots to that soil filter.
Okay.
Other comments on? Okay, we would need a motion to deem the application complete to start as our first step.
So moved.
Everyone. All right, so the motion is that the proposed Pine Ridge Estate subdivision application is complete. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded. Any discussion?
He mentioned the DEP approval that's needed.
Yes.
Can we add that as a condition, or is this?
Oh, this is just
separate?
deeming it complete.
Okay.
So not approval of it. That would actually wouldn't. The earliest that would be next meeting.
Okay.
And we don't give and as a board, we've never given the final approval until the DEP comes back
Okay.
with theirs. So it's kind of like
Okay.
it's a process.
Okay.
But good questions. All right. Any other questions? All right. Discussion. All those in favor of finding the application complete? Kevin?
Aye.
All right. Outstanding items you are okay with?
Yeah, I think a lot of the additional engineering comments were mainly housekeeping in nature, and I think the biggest thing, truthfully, was the test pit information, and we have that now, so.
Okay, what do you need from us?
I think you guys have given us some good direction. I think we'll put some final tweaks on this stuff and then come back to you hopefully at the next meeting.
Okay, so the deadline for the next meeting comes pretty quick.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the deadline for the next meeting was today.
See how fast it comes?
Wow.
Yeah.
You weren't kidding. That does come quick.
I was not kidding.
So the meeting after that.
That sounds good.
Andy, I'll need hard copies of that last stuff that you submitted afterwards.
Sure. How many would you like?
The same as usual.
Gotcha.
But we just voted to change it to 12
Okay.
with fewer full-size copies.
Okay. I will, are you all right if I wait until the whole submission is together and make one submission of everything that includes the test pit?
Sure. I just wanted to make sure you knew that we needed that for the board because they don't just go from the digital copies.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And before you go any as far as looking down the road is, so we would, considering if everything comes in and everything looks good, the board would vote to approve, pull it based upon the DEP comments coming back. We will not give final approval until DEP
Correct.
receive DEP. So if that all comes in,
Yep.
we're fine with doing that in 2 months.
Yep.
Otherwise, we wait. Okay.
Is there a deadline from when you grant that original approval to when you need to grant the final approval?
You mean a time?
Yeah, like a time deadline? There's not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, a couple of years, I guess.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I hopefully it's not that long, but
Right.
DEP is a little slow right now, so.
Yep. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that it's.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Can you accept a question from the public?
On the subdivision?
Yes, of course.
No, it would be the public hearing would be at the next meeting.
Okay.
A comment, Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
actually, in 2 meetings. Yeah, Wayne, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. Just wanted to let the applicant know, and I put in my memo, that the name conflict for E911, they might want to address that as quickly as possible so it can be recorded properly on the plans. There's a conflict with pine, the word pine.
Gotcha. I will take a look at that. I appreciate you mentioning it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Wayne. Sorry I skipped you.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Sandy, whenever that comes up for the next meeting, would you include it as a public hearing as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We are to the short-term rental discussion. So this is not a public hearing on this topic. I'm looking probably at either one or maybe even two workshops going forward, depending upon how far we get. And however, I would like this evening to hear comments from as many people that would like to on the topic. I hopefully that you have had an opportunity to read the draft that we put together at the last meeting. That was pretty much without, actually was that without any comment from the public, just from using what the neighboring communities have on the short-term rentals. So with that, as far as our draft goes, from the board, anybody have comments on the draft that you'd like to make prior to?
General comment.
Okay? No. Yes.
I'm just going to share the same opinion as I had last time. Is it's way too restrictive for somebody with personal property, in my opinion. And I'd like to see it just workshop this a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And anytime you have something like this, it always seems there are unintended consequences that are not particularly good for people. And I guess if we do pass this, we got to look as hard as we can at avoiding those things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the largest issues I have is that it's unenforceable. So we're going to run against, it says, all complaints regarding short-term rentals shall be brought to the attention of the code enforcement officer. It feels like the code enforcement officer is now acting as a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
With a complaint. If there's no code violation, then that's not enforceable.
It's not a code, right?
It's not a code. So I think that we're going down a rabbit hole here with this much restriction. So I understand that we need some ordinance as sort of a framework, but it's still too.
So still too restrictive.
Yep.
Okay.
That's my comment.
Kevin, you have anything you want to say?
I mean, I agree with Mark a lot, but there are two sides to the story here. There are people that will be impacted adversely, and I've talked to a few of those people. And then, like Mark says, you're impacting a person's right to use their land the way they see fit, and as long as they're using it in a safe way and not impacting like the sound. I mean, how do you control the sound? How do you control the parking? Who takes care of that? Unless we put some teeth in it, you really can't be able to put something forward that is meaningless to me.
Okay.
I actually felt like this was a much better way to address it than the first version that we looked at. To me, this is a little bit more like in line with the permitting process or the licensing process that, first, trying to create some sort of a registry of what's actually out there, and, having a yearly renewal of that type of a license seems not overly restrictive. I mean, that's what you would do for a permit or a business license or something along those lines. And, you know, I think it is in line with what a lot of our current ordinances already are, as far as like parking, trash, lighting, you know, those are all within what we already have for ordinances. You know, my thought is we also want to make sure, and we talked about this last month, is that the safety piece of it is that a lot of times, you know, these rentals are not, you know, I mean, there's no requirements necessarily to have working smoke alarms. And, you know, I think it's something to think about if we want to, you know, when we're looking at the septic information, do these properties, you know, a lot of them are right on the water. You know, we want to make sure that they have functioning septic systems and they're not in disrepair, and they are following the ordinances that we already have in place for this, for the zone. This to me didn't seem overly restrictive. It seemed within reason.
Okay.
I just don't want to lose sight that it's not a license, and it's not a business, it's a home that's being used for a business purpose. I think that's the line that I think that we have to figure out. It doesn't require a business license. It's not a license, it's a registration. So I think that's where, like if it was a bed and breakfast, then it's treated differently than this. It's not considered a short-term rental. So if the short-term rental in somebody's home, personal property, I think it needs to be treated like a personal property with respect to neighbors in a community. But I don't want to treat it like a business if it can't be licensed as a business. If it's not fully treated like a business. And that's the part
It's
that
being run as a business.
that's something we can look at.
Yep.
Does it have to be occupied 6 months of the year by the actual owner? You know, something like that. I'm not at that point to suggest something. I'm just saying it just seems like we're trying to make it a business. And if that's the case, then they get a business license for it. And it's completely different than what we're trying to move forward with here.
One thing
I mean, we've got, go ahead.
oh, I was
Go ahead, David.
I was just, going back to section 5, I think that's where the biggest issue is, you know, we're throwing it to the code, like Mark said, we're throwing it to the code enforcement officer, then he's going to throw it to the select board, and then they're going to make some determination, and then, you know, it's go to the courts and everything, and the court's going to look at it and say, well, you know, you haven't really delineated specific things that can cause these violations and penalties to happen. And especially like noise. I mean, what's the noise level? Who determines that? Did anybody record it? I mean, it's not, you know, it's kind of loose, very, very loose. And like you said, yeah, I agree, it's just a registration, but if they challenge that, you know, I don't think we have a leg to stand on, because we haven't really defined it a little bit tighter.
Greg?
You know, all I was going to say is that this ordinance, if you had a complaint about noise or whatever it is, nothing's going to happen immediately. So the problem's going to be there while it goes through the process, and you're talking days before any action gets taken. So if anybody thinks that this ordinance is going to be able to be enacted and stop someone from keeping you awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't see that it would do that. It's a long-term kind of thing. I guess it's really out to keep the owner in line, as opposed to stopping the problem immediately.
I mean, that's a great point too, with the noise. So let's say, like to Kevin's point a few months ago about the noise ordinance, we don't have one. So if somebody is going to violate that, then what are they violating? If we're going to make one up for this ordinance, then do we have the noise ordinance in the entire town now? So that's where it seems like we're creating rules for this that don't exist in everyday life in Raymond. And it seems a little strange, that's all. It seems like there's an agenda, that's all. It seems like something is being made up for this. And I just want it to be fair for everybody. Every ordinance, if we have a noise ordinance, so then you can implement it in here and say, you can't be louder than, X decibels, and if that's recorded by somebody, then you're in violation, and you have a fee structure, and that's fine. But it seems like it's not equally weighted, that's all. Like Kevin wants the signs up for around his house, and we can't do it. Why? Because we don't have a noise ordinance, so we can't enforce something we don't have. There's many people that, have parties all the time and loud music and turn it down after 10. That's going to be, we have to implement that here if it exists. But then again, I go back to the enforcement piece. If you call the Cumberland County Sheriff, they can't do anything because it's not didn't break a law. Just want to be careful with that, that's all. I know there needs to be one in place for sure, but not sure we're there yet.
Any other thoughts?
I think in there it required the person to have an occupancy for the permit, is that correct?
The occupancy
Yes.
posted in
When-
the building.
When did we start requiring occupancy permits for buildings in Raymond? There may be a lot of these camps that don't even have occupancy permit.
They should.
Even if they were built 60, 70 years ago?
There's probably not one in the file for ones. Well,
I'm sure Wayne's got them.
yeah, I haven't seen too many files without occupancy permit. So, and we determine occupancy on bedrooms, and that determines septic design. So that determines the occupancy number. Like try kind of saying that, when someone builds a single-family house, they're not saying 8-person maximum can live in this house. And with the short-term rental, we're saying that, there's an 8-person maximum for a 2-bedroom.
Occupancy limits are for businesses, correct? Not homes. Like if you have a home,
Yeah.
you have your family, somebody can't knock on the door, so you have 30 people.
Right.
So
if you have a big family, you have a big family.
That's the line. We need to figure out where we are on this, because we have to remember that this is someone's home that they're choosing to rent out. It's not a business. So if you start enforcing occupancy limits, then you're going to enforce that in someone's home. So that's the strange part here.
But I think there's a distinction here. I think that there's a distinction between a family and renting it out, and I think not putting a limit on there really is putting septic systems in danger. And if septic systems start failing on the lakes, that's, not to say it's going to happen, and I think most homeowners would want to protect their house. So I think that, just in speaking to one gentleman, he had too many people at his Airbnb, he kicked them out because he was having issues. So I think there will be some regulating on that, just because they want to protect their own asset.
Sure.
But,
that's what I would hope would happen.
Right.
That's somebody's.
I don't know.
Even all of the services, Airbnb, and all of the apps that you can rent these through, they have their own. That they regulate, and you sign the contract through them, and then they're enforced through.
Right.
So I completely understand that there needs to be regulation. It's just how it's.
Sure.
How it's being treated. It's not really a bed and breakfast or a hotel, but we're treating it exactly like that in every facet. So we want to be careful with what we do.
Oh, joy.
Okay, I think we all had a chance? Yes, we do. Okay, so I would like to get your comments. You need to go to the mic and state your name and make sure we're on the records. I do have one question that I would like those that do decide to talk, to answer for me. It's one of the things that I've been mulling over. You've heard that the board, you've seen our very quickly draft ordinance, and most of the board, I would say, it'd be fair to say that is leaning towards less restrictions, vice more restrictions that were requested in the proposed ordinance from the community. So one of the things that I would really appreciate if you were to address, and the question is, if there are a series of ordinances, or just a series of check marks that you have to go through, 5, 6, 10, whatever those would be. The first 2 or 3 or 4 are those safety issues, whether or not the septic system is up to speed, whether or not the home that's being rented can support 10, 12, or 2 or 4, whatever that occupancy would be. And then we had a long discussion last time on what Casco had in their ordinance, which basically was be a good neighbor, which a lot of this kind of falls down to, is to be a good neighbor. So if you have 20 some odd ordinances, and 4 or 5 of them are basic and apply to everybody, and then the rest of those individuals are good neighbors. So the ordinance, a more restrictive ordinance, does not apply to them at all, because they're a good neighbor. They keep track of what's being rented. They're careful to who they rent to. They're careful with their septic. They're careful with the numbers. They're careful with their parking. They do all that good. They do all that good neighbor stuff. Then all of these extra ordinances that are being considered or being proposed really are not applicable to that individual that's renting, because they're good neighbors. Now, if they're not a good neighbor, and you are on the receiving end of that, not a good neighbor, then what is your recourse to take? Well, if the ordinance simply says be a good neighbor, how do you then, as we've kind of said on the board here, how do you quantify or qualify or complain that somebody's not a good neighbor? What are the standards? So that's kind of what I'm hoping that those on both sides of the issue could really address for me. If you are a good neighbor, then only the safety stuff is going to apply to you. If you're not being a good neighbor, and you are impacting other people's property, then shouldn't those people that are being impacted have some sort of recourse? And should they not have an ordinance that would support that recourse, so that they're not suffering a loss of the use of their property because of how somebody else is renting out their property? Okay, I belabored that one, I think, long enough. I hope that made sense. I'd like to open it up with and get Peter up there first, if you wouldn't mind. I would just like to hear from the standpoint of the comprehensive plan as to how did I know that, Peter?
Peter Levitt, 2 Levitt Road. So I'll speak first just on the comprehensive plan, just to give a little background to how this all came about from the comprehensive plan's perspective. We've got 2 members of the committee up there that are on this board as well. But what I just tell you is the way that it came to our attention was that while we were drafting, and it's still in draft form, by the way, the comprehensive plan, but hopefully we'll be voting on it soon. The North Star Planning, who was our consultants, basically was doing the chapter on housing. And they estimated that 6% of Raymond's 3,000 dwellings, which would be 180, were short-term rentals. And there were actually 3 realtors on the comprehensive plan, and I got the general consensus from them that they felt at the very least that was an underestimation of how many short-term rentals there are in town. But what it did is it really raised the question, and so it was placed into the comprehensive plan, that we really need to just have a mechanism to know how many short-term rentals there are, knowing that any system isn't going to get 100% compliance. But that certainly the consultants, when they were going to Verbo and the like and trying to see, and what we know in the discussions last month were very clear that at least as many short-term rentals that go through some sort of formalized registry are, people that we've been renting to for 20 years. We don't advertise it. They come up for 2 weeks every summer, 3 weeks every summer, while we go elsewhere, and we have a short-term rental. Well, there's no way to track that unless you had some sort of mechanism for registry. And I know the discussion between license and registry, and I think that the stepping off point for this would first be, can we just get a handle on the numbers? Because I'm sure that everyone in this room, and certainly the people up front here, this isn't the last ordinance on short-term rentals. And my experience has been this, and now I'll talk not necessarily from the comprehensive plan's perspective, but my own experience and perspective, which is I've always been an advocate of being proactive rather than reactive. Unfortunately, for most ordinances, in my experience in communities, they tend to be reactive. Somebody does something, or someone lodges a complaint, and then it gets reviewed, and then someone says, we need an ordinance for it to cover it, and the like. That's being reactive. And I have always found that being proactive, which is, I believe, what we're doing now, is the reasonable way to go. And others will argue, well, but it's not always best to be the first. Let someone else do it. We'll see what they do. And in fact, that's not necessarily a bad way to go. But I would tell you that people that chafe against the fact that, the state's not going to come in here, or the municipality is not going to come in here and tell me what to do with my property. 25 years on the Zoning Board of Appeals, I can tell you. Every month I came up and basically had to look at the ordinances and tell my neighbors what they could or could not do with their property, which is why I've never held a voted public office in this town. And that's fine with me. Doesn't make you popular, but basically you'll go with what's written, and words are not perfect. I would tell you that when it gets to home rule or local control, I'm all in favor of that to a point. But if you're not proactive, I'd just direct you to LR 2003. In 2019, the state started talking about, we got to get more of a concentration of homes in growth areas, have less of these single-family homes on large lots being developed in all the rural areas. And we've been asking you for years to develop some sort of local ordinances that'll promote that. And most municipalities ignored it and said, no, we'll do our own thing. Well, you know what? The state came in and said, no, you'll do this. So it's not always the fact that your home rule is going to win out over the state. If the state says, no, we're going to say that for every buildable lot in the town, you can put a second structure there. And that's how we're going to deal with density. So anyway, as I go down and look at this, I see the question of as to whether it's too long, it's too short, there's too much. And, what I'm hearing is this. And I would absolutely go with Bob as far as, I would think your first charge, and most of it is in your draft, is safety and environmental considerations. So those are the things that I would say have to be addressed first. If it's not stated, or we don't have an ordinance for it, I could just tell you, if you look at questions about nuisances or noise. What are the common arguments? The ones I've heard are basically it's trash, it's noise, or it's parking. And what you can do, and I've got it here somewhere, there is no noise ordinance in Raymond. You can pick up the phone and you can call, because there's state statute about basically noise, disruptive behavior, and the like. But that I wouldn't think would be the first way you would go. The first way you would go is what I've read, is that what you do is you go over very politely and ask your neighbor, can you turn it down? and that's being a good neighbor. I don't know if you can legislate that any more than you can legislate morality. I think that's one of those things you can't really, that'd be the first step. You know, if someone's making a lot of noise, you go over the neighbor and you ask them to turn it down. If they don't do it then, you got to have some recourse. And if it's nothing more than simply having a registry in the town where the code enforcement officer says, yeah, I got this complaint, I'm checking that box. And all of a sudden it comes up for renewal and you've set a threshold, 3 strikes and you're out. And then guess what? Then you've got enforcement. Is it going to be perfect? No. The numbers that I looked at as far as registries go, where towns have done this, they estimate they get about 5 to 10% compliance. So, you know, I mean, you got to be reasonable as far as that goes as well. You're not going to get a whole lot. But I guess what I'd say is, Bob, as far as your comment goes, I'd concentrate on the safety parts of it and on the environmental impacts. So that certainly ties in with how many people can be on the premise, because that goes to septics. And if I had my way, I'd have every septic in the town checked that was near the water, at least. But of course, we don't want to open those can of worms. I believe that the reason that this issue is so difficult is that it took, from my calculation, 4 years for the group to get this in front of the selectmen to the point where they'd say, we'll refer it to the planning board. Yeah. You know?
Which was awfully nice of them, wasn't it?
Exactly. But it was kind of like nobody wants to touch that, right? Because it is a complex issue. And so, you know, I don't envy you, you know, your jobs here, but I think that basically this draft plan is not bad. I think that there's got to be some teeth into it, but it's got to be reasonable. And if the code enforcement officer is doing nothing more than just keeping the scorecard, and there's been a threshold set for annoyances or complaints, so be it. If it comes to a point where it's a certificate of occupancy, I mean, I still have a lot of questions about cleaning up our language in there, you know. I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that there are a lot of properties that would be before we required a certificate of occupancy. But the bottom line is if you do require that in your draft, if you look at the definition of certificate of occupancy, I mean, you got to be looking at insulation, foundation, electrical, plumbing. I mean, it's the whole thing. And so it could be a serious renovation for someone who's got a 50-year-old camp on Panther Pond. So that would all have to be taken into consideration as well.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
Okay, I don't, my goal is not to call on people, but I would like to hear from somebody who put forth the proposed ordinance that went to the selectmen. Is anybody here that could talk to that? Mike?
Going to try to wait to the end, Bob, so thank you.
Maybe this is the end.
So, good evening. Mike Richmond, 15 Cedar Lane. And I appreciate this. I'm speaking on behalf of the group of citizens known as the Short-Term Rental Initiative that was just referred to. And I'll try to be brief, but we definitely have some thoughts to share with you. First, we want to thank the town for putting this together. We realize it's just a draft, but this is a great start. So thank you. During the last meeting, a board member sort of described how they had recently enjoyed staying at a short-term rental with some friends. I think it was you, Mark. You know, respectful, did the dishes, cleaned up, had a great time. We understand that. We know that most renters are respectable, not a problem. That's not why we're here. Our group formed out of experiences, concern for the groups that are not respectful. We are living it. Many of these properties, not all, but many, are non-hosted properties. That means the owner is not around. A group shows up on their own, they enter a code, they get into the house, and it's not monitored. Some of these properties are quite expensive rentals, so you end up with large groups coming in to share that expense. The setup for some of these events that they have there, they take days to set up, then they have the event, then they take days to clean up. Members of our group These are all Raymond citizens, your neighbors, deal with large and loud events at properties used for short-term rentals, especially on the unhosted properties. There's weddings, loud music, porta potties lined up right on property lines, lots of cars clogging up the road. Bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, large gatherings with music, megaphones we just had, fireworks, right? They bring pets, even if they're not supposed to allow them. They leave trash outside, and they even leave trash out on the ice in the winter. This is why our group has put in nearly 3 years of effort into this. We are simply trying to protect our way of life. We are trying to protect our right to a quiet, peaceful environment. We're trying to protect the reasons that we love to live here. The short-term rental industry is creating issues in towns similar to Raymond all across the country. It is widely published. You can Google it just like we have for the last 3 years. Our research proved that many towns admitted that they waited too long to address it. To Peter's point, let's be proactive, not reactive. And now they're living the consequences, and they regret it. Please keep in mind that if you rent out your property for less than 30 days, this does not apply to you, okay? If you rent it out just for less than 30 days to supplement your income to cover the taxes or operating expenses, this does not apply to you. This is to address properties that exist to profit from the short-term rental market. If you own a rental business in town and rent cabins for the summer, and that is how you make your money, you must know that there's a movement in town with out-of-state investors, corporations, coming in creating competition for you. That's why we're here. Right now, they're completely unrestricted in Raymond. It's the Wild West to them, and they know it. So having some guidelines, some strict guidelines in place, will ultimately help protect what we have and what they have, not hurt it. So if you have a long-term a rental property here and you've had it for years, this should help protect what you have, because what's happening across the country is crazy. So want to offer a couple quick responses to issues brought up by some short-term rental owners. We've been very open to feedback. First, they've said that this would be the most restrictive ordinance in the country. Not by far. This simply is not true. Even Bar Harbor, Rockland, Camden, Cape Elizabeth, they all have quite restrictive ordinances. Just in the state of Maine, there's over 40 towns that have ordinances in place. And we just learned that what are they called, the undocumented territories, which are not formal townships, they're getting one, right? The state's putting it out, I guess. Second, we've also heard complaints about the economic impact, and this is a big one. Many of these short-term rental properties are owned by people that do not live here. They're corporations, they're packs of investors. Or they people just maintain their properties just to bring in revenue, right? They're often investments made to profit off our beautiful environment, and the profit goes to them. Their customers are primarily from out of town, not Raymond residents, I would imagine, who come and spend money on their rental. Yes, these people may stop in Raymond while in town, but let's be honest, I think that Raymond businesses would have more customers and make more money from having a full-time, year-round family here than a part-time seasonal rental property that's maybe a third operation. So where's the benefit for Raymond financially if we keep letting these things be built and taken over? These properties bring in a lot of people, cars, they use our roads, waterways, and then they leave. How does this financially benefit Raymond? They only financially benefit the investors. So I'd like to point out a few specific items we would like the board to consider for changes on this draft. First, we've drafted some good neighbor guidelines, which we've spoken about. And as the name suggests, it describes how to be a good neighbor. We ask you to use ours or create your own based on ours and make it part of the ordinance. To me, it'd be nice to have this as part of any rental agreement in the town and to have it clearly mounted in the rental property for the guests to see and abide by. Second, we do think there needs to be an overall cap on the amount of short-term rental properties in Raymond. Right now, there's no limits. And again, other towns greatly regret not putting a cap in place early on. Once they're in place, they're really hard to undo. As such a desirable town, we suggest a cap of 10% on all properties that are within or have deeded access to the shoreland zone. We need to protect our waterways. To Peter's point, the recent directive from the state of Maine mandates that municipalities find ways to provide more housing. We're all struggling with it. Please understand that allowing more of these properties to become short-term rentals is actually going against that mandate. The property next to me, where I live, it's a house. It's built as a house, but it's not used as a home, as no family actually lives there. So it has taken away a potential spot where a family could live. Third, we think there should be a way to protect too many SDRs, short-term rentals, from being built next to each other. Imagine living on a street where there's 3 or 4 of them lined up. It's happened in towns in the Midwest we read about. They call them a dark street, since that area becomes void of families. So we're suggesting a limit of no more than 2 short-term rentals on adjacent properties, including properties across the street from each other. Fourth, occupancy. This draft bases occupancy on the amount of bedrooms plus 2 additional guests. Why would we allow more guests than the septic system is designed to handle? If you designed a bridge for a maximum weight, would you allow more than it's designed for? It does not make sense to us. Please consider capping off the number of guests to align with the occupants the septic system is designed to handle, period. Fifth, we suggest limiting a minimum stay to 3 days to ensure that we don't have groups coming in for an event just for a day or 2. From our experience and research with other towns that are suffering from this, the 1 and 2 day renters, they just come to party. It's a wedding, it's a bachelor party, it's a bachelorette party, then they leave. In addition to that, if you allow for a few days, and then for another few days after that, and another few days after that, it becomes a lot of turnover and commotion to get that done. The turnovers are caretakers coming in and out, cleaners, trash trucks, people, in and out. We therefore also suggest limiting it to 1 group per week, regardless of how many days that group is on the property. So we understand that a short-term rental owner may not like this, but it is only because they feel like they would not make more money that way. Please consider this to protect us, the citizens that live here and live next to these. Let's try to prioritize our peaceful enjoyment over their maximum profits. Sixth, I'm almost done, I promise. Sixth, I've heard from a few short-term rental owners that they simply built a home and are using it as a home. And Mark, that to your point, sorry, I'm not picking on you.
Oh, that's fine.
And that they should not be subject to any more than any other homeowner. But to this I want to say, this is not how building codes work. Building codes are primarily focused on how a structure is used, not just how it's built or what it looks like. For example, if you bought an old mill, you wanted to make it into housing for the elderly, a whole new rule book applies, right? It's not just the structure, it's how it's used. So when these properties are used similar to a hotel or motel, why are the rules different? So we completely support the code officer and fire department to inspect these properties and ensure they're safe as possible. Seventh, almost done, last page. Seventh, probably more of a clerical item, but we don't remember seeing a deadline for submissions for the short-term rental owners to submit their paperwork. Maybe I missed it. Something to think about. 8th, last one. Section 3.D.H addresses that the rental registration certificate be displayed at the rental unit. Great idea. Please consider adding something to this portion to ensure that any advertising that the short-term rental owner does be in alignment with that maximum number of occupants. We think that's going to avoid issues. So to close this out, please understand that this process is not unfair to these types of businesses. I don't know if you realize this. Any business owner that wishes to operate a business in Raymond has to go to the select board for approval. Short-term rental places don't. If this ordinance is properly instituted by the town, not an easy task, I admit, this entire process can be self-funded, meaning it would not cost taxpayers a dime. The town would decide on the fee structure and would then be able to use their staff or hire additional staff if it's needed to ensure that it's done properly and doesn't cost the town a dime. In fact, we interviewed a great local company that has great software to help track all of this, and we're happy to share that with you. Very inexpensive and very effective. So please consider all of this as you move forward. We've worked on this for years, and we are willing to help in any way possible. Thank you.
Is that all off the top of your head, Mike?
Pardon?
Is that all off the top of your head?
Yeah, I just memorized it.
Well, don't go, Mike. I'm sure you're going to get questions. I would think.
I mean, I have a couple.
ahead.
I know that you had mentioned a couple things like most are unhosted and that most are owned by corporations and entities. Do you have like a data set that you're working from on some of these things, or are these based on like surveys or your interactions with some of these folks?
Excellent question. They're based off the people that have joined our group out of frustration for things that are going on next to them. I don't want to say most, I want to be careful with my words. Many of them are owned by out-of-state people, companies, corporations. They're not here. And to further that, that's why we would love this, because we have no idea.
Well, I mean, that's kind of why I asked the question, and to Peter's point, I think I mentioned this last time, like, it would be great to have some kind of foundation or data set to, like, know how many are unhosted, how many are hosted, primary residents, non-primary residents, that kind of thing, because I know we break out those definitions, and it's kind of tough to picture without just kind of making up scenarios in our head what's actually existing out there. So I think it was tried to capture that intent inside this ordinance with gathering that data, because I think that's the best way to get it, I guess. Get those registrations in, that way we know, and then, you know, it's probably going to be a living document maybe for a year or two, you know, if we need to change it based on that data as well.
Mike, you mentioned the company at the end of your presentation there?
Yes, I don't know the name of it offhand. We had a wonderful interview with them, and
what do they do?
They are from the Scarborough, South Portland area. A couple of guys that have developed software that code officers in town are using to track short-term rentals. I believe Casco is already using it, or Bridgeton, and they're local, and they have some really good ideas. Wyndham's considering it.
It's STR Enforcement.
Was that the name of it?
That's the name of the company.
STR Enforcement.
STR Enforcement.
Yep. Happy to share information with you on that.
Scarborough definitely has possibly Gray.
Oh, possibly Scarborough and Gray. So.
Okay. Any other questions before we let Mike? Give him 5 minutes off to call him back. Kevin?
Oh, that was a good presentation.
Yep. Okay, Mike?
Just a couple of quick things.
Peter, we already heard from you. You only got one shot.
Oh, no. This, what? Really? No. Okay, so what I meant to say the first time, so it's just an...
Oh, okay, just to get,
The first thing is that in order to get this ball rolling, and from the comprehensive plan's perspective, that was exactly it. What we need is some way to count it. So, because we've got no way to count now, and the estimates don't seem to be, even from a highly paid planning group, we're just kind of picking numbers out of the air. So that's number one. And then, obviously, this will be a living document, and as we get the numbers in, then we can determine things like, is the fee enough, not enough, all that sort of good stuff. For anybody that didn't see it in last week's paper, Newry residents reject vacation rental ordinance, okay? So it's a small place. It's much smaller than we are. I believe that the vote was something like 40 to 15 at their town meeting, and there's only like 400 full-time residents. However, the code enforcement officer was the one that brought it to their attention, and what she was saying is that the well water is in jeopardy because it's obviously, like us, the population swells, only for them it's more in the wintertime because it's skiing. And so that's why they brought it to the people, and it was voted down. So I'd say, in considering any ordinance that you draft, obviously what I've learned is that that's not the first step. I mean, that's the first step, it won't be the last step. Ultimately, you got to get people to vote for it. So they could easily, if an ordinance isn't crafted, and we've seen this in the past, and there's enough people in the town that are offended by how it was drafted, they'll just vote it down. And then we go back to square one, and it delays the whole process of getting it done. And like I say, my whole focus is on safety and environmental. And secondly, and I'll just ask the code enforcement officer, I believe Chris Hansen told me this once in a discussion, that for years in Raymond, the specs for the size of a septic in Raymond was always built to accommodate one more bedroom. So that was what Chris told me. So when I built my house in '85, it was a 3-bedroom, but actually the field I had to put in could handle a 4th bedroom. And that was just a way of saying, if you're unanticipating and you have another child or whatever, you don't have to change your septic system necessarily. If you're going to have 5 more kids, that'd be a different story. So I'm not exactly sure, but I believe Chris said
so
that.
So you can expand by 25%, but that doesn't include shoreland zone. Shoreland zone is treated differently. They're already sized up in shoreland zone, though. It's 120 gallons per day within 250 foot of a great pond.
Yeah.
It's 90 gallons per day outside of that.
Okay.
But you're correct in, most areas, yes, you could expand by that 1 bedroom without expanding your system.
Sure.
The same rule doesn't apply to shoreline zone.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess my only other question in here, as far as the draft that you guys put together, my understanding is that state statute says that if you have an ADU, you don't have to have any parking. So would this overrule that? So if I've got an ADU and the state statute says I don't even have to put in, the 1 or 2 parking spaces that normally is required in your ordinance, then if that ADU is built and it's for a short-term rental, how many cars can you have there? Thanks.
I think Pete is bringing up a good point that we could need some foundational ordinances to be in place, like on-street parking and noise, before you can even consider putting these other things into this ordinance. It doesn't do, like I said before, do any good to have those shoved into this, and like Mike said, unless they exist across the town, in fairness.
I completely agree, Kevin. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. We're building an ordinance governing things that don't exist for this purpose. So we have to, across the board, create ordinances for everything that we're talking about, and then we can address this. If that's the way we want to go about it, but we're just creating, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we can do it at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what Kevin just said. I agree completely.
I always thought he slept. I didn't really think.
Sleeps with his eyes open.
Is somebody here on the other side of the issue that really does not want us to be moving in this direction at all? Hi.
Jessica Dobson, 141 Raymond Hill Road. We unfortunately have been victims of the town of Raymond and the short-term rental initiative. Kathy Plummer is our neighbor, and she's worked with these people. And as you've read the letters that she wrote about us, a lot of lies, a lot of fear-mongering. She'd make you
Yeah, but
think that we were
this
like...
is not the proper place for this.
Right.
But what I'm interested in are your comments concerning
Yeah.
the short-term
Well,
draft,
what they
not
proposed...
individual comments.
Well, this is why I'm telling you why I'm here. Because we've been a victim of this again.
Could you address the short-term?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
So the short-term rental, I believe, is a non-issue. He was just asked how many people are renting that are corporations. He doesn't even have an answer to that. This has been 3 years they've been working on it, and they can't tell you how many people are renting. It's really a non-issue in this town. There are certain people that are writing this initiative because they don't like their neighbor. And then we're talking about a good neighbor policy. Who's to say who's the good neighbor in the situation? Because we're really good neighbors, but our neighbor isn't. Just because she doesn't like us, she can say that we're not the good neighbor. It's like, how do you do this good neighbor policy? I really think that's just a funny language and something that, if she doesn't like it, that we're hosting a private event. And
Well,
it's
this
on
has
my own
nothing to do
property.
with, that has nothing to
Like,
do
how
with
does that
private
make
events.
you- What was that?
There's nothing to do with private events. We're not in the business of private events. This is short-term rentals. This is rental properties.
Right. If there are people on my property and there's noise, like, how does that make me a bad neighbor?
Are you renting your property? Is that what this issue is?
If I choose to rent my property,
Is that
to
where the
have
problem
people
is?
on my property, who's to say who's the good neighbor, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, I'm asking you, are you currently renting, do you have currently a short-term rental on your property, 2, 3, 4, 5 days?
We have rented in the past, yes. Yep.
Okay. And would the safety checks, the environmental conditions would be an impact on that rental?
So the safety checks, we live in our home, so our home is to code. Everything is to code on our property. We take care, like you said, we live on our property,
Right.
so we, of course, take care of our property.
So you disappear for a week and you rent the property?
No, we stay around on our property, so.
So you have a separate house that you rent?
We have a camp on the lake, and then we have our own home.
Oh, okay, so you're renting the camp,
No, we're renting our home.
and you moved to the camp?
If we stay at the camp, we stay at the camp. Sometimes we stay on our own property, so. But what I'm saying is that this whole short-term rental initiative is really a non-issue because there's no police that are being called to our town. This is a group of people who don't like their neighbors, and they're writing this ordinance because they don't like their neighbors. And now we're spending a lot of time, a lot of energy in this town about it. And I understand that other towns have put forth ordinances, and even Casco, and we've talked with people from Casco. And again, it doesn't apply fairly to everyone in Casco. It's kind of like who likes who and who gets, violations. So we need to be very careful moving forward if we're going to listen to a small group of people who don't like their neighbors and throw ordinances out there. So I just want us to really think about what we're doing here and who are the people complaining.
Okay, thank you.
and
But I
there
don't think it's a small group of people. I mean, I think I heard there were 278 signatures that were from the town of Raymond that
Yeah,
wanted this.
and how many people are in the town of Raymond? That's a small portion of the town of
Huge
Raymond,
portion of the voting, but okay, gotcha.
but a small portion of the town of Raymond,
I agree.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
how many people are in the town of Raymond?
Oh, 4,200.
4,200.
4,200, and they got 200 and...
I don't know the exact number. I
Yeah.
heard somewhere in the
That's
270s.
a very small portion of Raymond. And they're an older, group of people who have the time on their hands. There's a lot of people in our town that are busy with kids, and they're not realizing what's happening behind the scenes. So we need to really, make it more open to the public to let them know what this group is trying to...
That's why we're here.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
And
thank
that's
you.
why I'm getting up and speaking,
All right.
because I've been affected by it, so. I just would like you guys to really consider this and consider where it's coming from. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you want me to get your microphone? Are you okay standing up?
I can get
Okay.
He's one of the retired ones.
My name is Robert French. I live on AI Road. There's an old saying, if it flies like a duck, swims like a duck, looks like a duck, maybe it is a duck. And when somebody's trying to tell me it's a goose, I got a problem. So if a piece of property is going to be rented consistently throughout the year, including the winter, etc., and the owner of that property is never there to reside in it, maybe it's beginning to become a business, a commercial piece of property, and should be viewed as that. And the other thing I'm kind of concerned about is, who do I call at 2 o'clock in the morning to break up that party? You know, you can forget Cumberland County Sheriff's Department. They won't show up until the next day. Because that has happened to us in the past. So if you could institute some form of recourse for the problem, that would be helpful. If to just have it out there, who do you call? And I don't think I'm going to get any of your phone numbers. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I got you down as a duck, is that right?
Like a who?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm only kidding. I'm just teasing.
They're ducks.
The ducks, okay. That's what I had you down as. Okay, with anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Stu Fred. We have owned a home on Whitmore Cove for 20 years. We use the house for the summer every year. We used to make that 8-hour drive back and forth once a month. Now that I'm retired, we're up here for the summer, which is great. I just want to touch on a couple of things because I think I don't want to beat a dead horse to death. When we bought our house in 2005, there was a rental property next door to us. And I can just tell you from personal experience, it was a 2-bedroom cottage. And it consistently was being rented, it was unhosted, was being rented to multiple young couples generally, sometimes 4 or 5, with cars parked extending into the street because there's no driveway in that house. And they were often, not always, I mean, there were renters that were respectful and quiet and came up with their kids, and they were fine. And there were also weeks when there would be multiple couples drinking outside till 1 o'clock in the morning, sometimes urinating in the lake. And there were times we had to call the sheriff, or we went to the local realtor where we knew the house was being rented and screamed at them. And by that time, we'd already had a crummy week. So you'll have to excuse me for bemoaning the fact that we drove 8 hours to be awake during party time for a whole week. And I think that's the quality of life issue that we're talking about. Now, on our street, there are 34 homes. It's a private road. Of those 34 homes, statistically, 4 of the houses are full-time rentals, all unhosted. The most recent addition to that list was a house that was sold by very good friends of ours. It was a single couple. It was a 4-bedroom house. They occasionally had guests come in. They never rented it. And we know exactly what they did with the property in terms of improvements that they made. And the individual that bought it turned the house over to his son. And his son, within 2 days of closing on the property, had contacted Airbnb and listed the house for up to 16 occupants. And I think that's the kind of abuse that we need this ordinance to avoid. Because I know there's a house across the lake, a beautiful home, right outside of Turtle Cove, which is also being listed on Airbnb. And I think we will see more and more of that continuously. As another caveat to the issue of parking, the parking issue is not, or the obstruction of the roads, is not just an issue of convenience. Over the past 5 years, I'm a retired maxillofacial surgeon, and I have my own AED in my house for any emergencies that might occur on our street. All of our neighbors know that I have it. And over the past 5 years, there have been 3 occasions when neighbors have required ambulances for life-threatening situations. One was a neighbor that had a devastating stroke. Another one was a neighbor who got his foot caught between a boat and a lift and was bleeding profusely. And another one was actually a next-door renter when that house was being rented to us. And she was an elderly woman whose husband capsized in a sailboat on Sebago, on Jordan Bay. And she ran in the woods to come over and get us to help. She fell and shattered her arm. So all of these cases in a fairly short period of time required ambulances to be able to get down the road. Any one of them, if the road was obstructed, we're at the end of the road, so you have to go past 30 homes to get to us. Any one of them, if it were being rented to multiple families, there were 3 other rental properties who are fortunately pretty good about that, but it could have resulted in the death of any one of those people. I mean, these were life-threatening injuries. So all I can say is this is something I think the town should take responsibility for and make sure that these properties are adequately regulated. I'm not suggesting that the ability to rent somebody's home should be restricted. This house that has already been listed on an Airbnb, the owner does not live there at all. I mean, this is strictly a business for him. The father bought it for his son so the son could use it as a business to support himself and his wife. And I don't know what they're going to do with the house. We have had no experience with their renters, so I have no idea what it's going to be like. But 16 people in a 4-bedroom house, to me, is a little bit excessive. Plus the 5 or so cars that might show up and be coming down the road. I mean, our road is, if you know Whitmore Cove, it's wide enough for 1 car at a time. People are walking there in the middle of summer all day with their dogs, with their children, pushing strollers. Grandchildren are visiting parents. And it is not a road that's conducive to being heavily trafficked. I mean, we have enough trouble just getting the garbage truck to come down once a week. So, to have that road obstructed in any way, not only can it be a life-threatening issue if an ambulance has to get down there, but somebody can get really hurt by cars that are going too fast. I mean, our neighborhood next to us, Rusty Road and Quarry Cove, were forced to put in speed bumps because rental properties were abusing a reasonable speed limit on those roads, and they were concerned about accidents on the road. So I'm just giving you my personal experience, and for whatever it's worth, I've read the ordinance. I also read the one that was put online last spring or early last summer that I think was distributed to a bunch of properties. Was it STR? Yeah, but this one that I read from Raymond was far less restrictive than that one was. Mm-hmm. And I think only good things can happen if there's at least some regulation of the properties.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hi.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Roma. I live on 141 Raymond Hill. I just want to discuss the topic of young families moving into Raymond. And they talked about like these rentals taking up spaces for young families to move in. But nobody knows about Raymond. When I tell people I'm from Raymond through sports, they have no clue where that is. And how are people going to know if they're not able to rent out the place? Renting out the place is showing the areas around, like our lakes, like the nature. Nobody's going to move into Raymond if they don't know what Raymond is or where Raymond is. So I think this whole renting out thing, it helps us, it benefits us, because not a lot of young families are moving in here because our schools are going down. We don't have a high school, we're losing our middle school. There's not a lot of places young families can move into, and they wouldn't know about it because we don't have schools. Like, they're shutting down. So I think these rentals are benefiting us, getting families to know about Raymond and know about our lakes. Because if we get rid of that, who's going to know about Raymond? They're not just going to say, oh, Raymond's a nice place, let's move our family there, because they don't know where it is. So that's what I think you should just think about, because it's really bringing in families and bringing rentals and summer homes in.
Yes, sir.
So David Murch, 2 Canal Road, Raymond, also the current chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals for Raymond. So I'm not really coming to you as the chair, but one of the things that we have to do on the zoning board, obviously, is to review ordinances as people of the town come to us and to make decisions based on what's in those ordinances. And a lot of times there is some interpretation. So I appreciate what got drafted. I have found a few areas that are a little bit vague. I also recognize that this is a draft, so I know it's not a final, but I would like to bring some of the areas that I see as potential. So under section 1, it's purpose and authority, which is laid out very well. I would just encourage us breaking authority out and actually making reference to Title 30A as well as municipal home rule powers. To me, that just makes it very clear that the town of Raymond has authority to bring forth this ordinance. Under section 2, definitions, we have dwelling unit, and the definition is shown as coming from the Raymond land use ordinance. There's really 2 definitions. There's one that falls under land use and then one that falls under shoreland. So I want to ensure that we have a definition here that encompasses both.
Definitions always get us.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, the shoreland one, sorry to interrupt, but the shoreland one is state required versus the land use ordinance can be tailored specifically to the town. But yeah. There's a couple of those that I discovered when I was going through comparing them.
Under section 3 for registration requirements, under item B for renewal period, this talks about the short-term rental registrations being renewed annually on or before January 1, but they're also under section A, or item A, it talks about them being valid for 1 year from the date of issuance. So just simply, I just found the on or before January 1 to be a little confusing, and that's all I wanted to bring up to there. Also, under section C, item 2, it says registrations completed under this ordinance are not transferable to a new owner. Any change in ownership shall require a new registration. I just feel that it would be clarifying to just say in there that any current registrations would then also be terminated. I know it's sort of referenced in this, but adding that clarity, I think, would help avoid any confusion. Under section 4, performance standards, item G, it talks about subletting and event hosting. It talks about unlawful to host events that include guests beyond the property's maximum occupancy rate. It's the word property that gets me because we're talking about occupancy limits that are for the dwelling unit. So property actually includes anything that's on the property, the land, accessory. So just wondering if that should be using the exact wording of occupancy limits as opposed to property's maximum occupancy rate. Just some clarification. Section 5, item C, it talks about violation of enforcements and resulting in the issuance of a notice of violation from the code enforcement officer. I don't really have any, call it an issue there, but if we go to section 6 for appeals, it just talks about decisions of any town official under the ordinances shall be appealed to the select board within 30 calendar days. Our ordinances say that any notice of violation should be appealed to the zoning board. So it seems to be just something there that might need to be considered, and that's it.
So you want all these things coming to you, huh?
What's that?
You want all of these appeals coming?
No,
Look at the business?
If they do, we're welcome to hear them, but I want clarity in what we should decide on. So.
Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Are you taking any comments from Zoom?
Yes.
So I've just got an observation to consider.
You need to tell us your name and address first, please.
Yep, I'm Victor Otley. I live on Jordan Lane in Raymond on Panther Pond. I'm also president of the Panther Pond Association, although I am not speaking on behalf of the Panther Pond Association right now. But we have talked about the short-term rental situation amongst Panther Pond Association members. I'll talk about Panther Pond specifically, but there's a long history on Panther Pond of people renting out small cottages to cover tax costs and other things. Some of those cottages are not, they're not occupied in the winter. They're just occupied in the summer, and some of them are not occupied all summer and are just rented, periodically. And the first thing I'll say is that I think for myself, I'm very supportive of the short-term rental initiative effort. I've witnessed in my travels communities getting destroyed by lack of ordinance and regulation of short-term rentals, and I can provide examples if anybody's interested. But the one thing that I've shared this with the short-term rental group is I think that seasonal cottages that are shut down in the winter should be considered differently than year-round cottages that are clearly run as for-profit businesses. And this may sound like not a big deal, but I think that the 30-day limit is a very arbitrary limit that's been established to provide exemption from short-term rental. And if you look at the math, and I have a short-term rental cottage that is seasonal. If you look at the math around renting these small seasonal cottages, what I think is imperative is that we allow those owners to cover their taxes, but also create monies that would be used for maintenance, and specifically for failing septic systems. And failing septic systems is one of the biggest threats to the lakes. We just did, Panther Pond Association just did a full watershed survey of our watershed, and I think we've done a good job of doing what we can to mitigate phosphorus and other things getting into the lake, but we have no way of looking at septic systems as a source of phosphorus and issues running into the lake. The math that I've shared with the short-term rental group, which I'm happy to share, further, to me suggests that 45 days of rental and potentially 60 days of rental for seasonal properties would provide enough income to the property owner that they could cover their taxes and fund dollars to support new roofs, new septic systems, and things like that. So, although very supportive of the initiative, I just ask people to think about the difference between a seasonal cottage that's being shut down in the winter and a year-round home that is designed to accommodate a large number of people. And I would hate to see the seasonal cottage owner have to pay $500 a bedroom, and then when their rental season is like 6 to 8 weeks, for the year. And I think it's really important that we allow them to be able to not just pay their taxes, but also to be able to replace septics, to replace roofs, and to do other, repairs on the properties. And I think 30 days is too short. Thank you.
So 7 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks is what you would think covers those costs?
Yeah, I think if you can rent for 6 weeks, I think you get enough income to cover those costs. I've suggested to the short-term rental group that you exempt seasonal cottages, of small occupancy, 4 2 bedrooms or something like that, that you exempt it for 60 days and treat it differently than a year-round property or a property that in the original ordinance draft was just defined as a resort.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
On my 4th page. Got a paper.
The thing is the back side of the agenda.
What? Like a chair. Oh, there you go.
I guess your password isn't working for people to log in online. There are people that are trying to log in.
They have to go back to the town, back to the agenda that's listed in the town, and that one will work. It's the old one that's not working.
I'm Marilyn Westcott, 172 AI Road. This is a very tricky situation. And there's so many considerations and things I don't even know, such as if the town sets up specific ordinances for short-term rentals or anything else, if things are not done, are we as a town opening ourselves to liabilities and suits if we don't cover things properly? I think in addition to short-term rentals, we need to have clear, regular ordinances that apply to even long-term rentals. There are issues, we've had to call the sheriff for noise and disturbance, and it wasn't a short-term rental. So there have to be avenues for us to have resources as residents of this town to be effective. And, we can call an officer for a rabid dog or whatever, but we don't have in this town a lot of easy avenues that we can use just to have it enforceable. I think we need to have something that can be enforced. If we aren't proactive, we will end up in a much dire situation. I applauded way back in the 80s of the Luneco Land Trust setting up as a proactive situation, because if they didn't preserve some of the land in our areas, the Lakes region, it would be all developed by now because Portland was expanding outward. And so we do have some chance, and it was caught early enough to preserve. And I think we're trying to preserve a way of life. And if I live in a residential zone, I do not expect to have businesses next door to me. And when something, I applaud Mr. Otley's idea of extending it beyond 30 days, because when they doubled our taxes back in the early 2000s, we couldn't pay them without renting to friends, and I called my insurance company, and they said, without adding more premiums to your insurance, you can rent by your coverage up to 6 weeks. And so we only did 4 weeks, but it cut the taxes in half. It helped. And we then did it for 3 weeks after because we wanted use, and we are a neighborhood where we live. And I think we need to define when something becomes a business. Now, is it a business in here? In the draft, I applaud this revised draft. I think there has to be some latitude, but I think we have to have some specifics, and it's tricky. But is it then, if we say 30 days or 45 or whatever, once it's rented for more than that, does it become a business? It's going to be very hard for any of the people having to enforce something to go and count how many kids are sleeping on a couch, or are there more than 2 in a bedroom? Are there whatever. I think if we had an ordinance that could have people have to have their septic systems tested, and if they're functional, whether they're renting or not, but we don't really have that I know of. We live on the lake and we're very concerned about the quality of our water. And if we don't know what's leaking, and I've been over in Keyser Lake and seen where there's every 50 feet there's a cottage and there's algae all growing there, because I do a lot of work on invasive plant inspection. When I go to where there's no development, there's no algae. So somebody's system is leaking. We don't know who or how, because there's no way to go and do that. So it's a balance between specific requirements of all of us as citizens and allowing some latitude and freedom. And as Peter said, you have a problem, you go and you speak to your neighbor and you try to work it out. But there has to be some recourse when that fails. But in a residential zone, I don't expect businesses that deal with disruption. I don't mind somebody being an accountant, sitting in his house and doing his work, or consulting from his home office. But having the public coming in and out and creating things. I know that we had a situation where it was in a commercial zone last year, when the business wasn't having proper parking. And there were ways to enforce it, and there were policemen who could be there when people left the business and they were drunk or whatever. And so there was some ability to enforce. I don't want to create a lot of stuff that can't be enforced. Thank you.
Thanks.
But I do applaud everybody's hard work, because I go round and round, and it's very hard to be fair. Our neighbor, when the first draft came out, he is sitting next to a short-term rental. It's constantly rented, year-round, and we're now facing the possibility that there's got to be, because the people are on the other side of him, but they're not two in a row. He's sandwiched between two, one short-term rental and one about to become that. So you can't easily define it. And what if he ever wanted to rent his? He can't. He loses his rights. So it's difficult. Thank you.
Thanks.
Wayne has his hand raised. No.
What was that?
Wayne?
No. Wayne, oh, Wayne, go ahead.
Oh, there it is.
Sorry, I guess not.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, my computer keeps freezing. That's what I'm doing. I'm all set.
Okay. All right. So thank you for all those comments.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Meister would like to speak on Zoom.
Okay,
Sorry, I guess not.
go right ahead.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Keeps freezing. That's what I'm all set. Okay.
Hello? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Awesome. Good evening. I think I'll start with number one is, I think we really need to have the right meeting invites in the agendas. I don't think it's acceptable to have incorrect meeting invites. So I've missed, a good chunk of this, so I can't really go back and comment, but I think it's got to be accurate in our agendas in order for the town to participate in processes like this, especially such an ordinance of this importance and focus in the town. So I'll start there. Two is, I think, overall this ordinance as written, I think is pretty fair. I think there's a big mischaracterization that there's these big businesses coming in and building dozens and dozens of short-term rentals all throughout the lake, and I just don't think that's accurate. I think, as everybody knows, myself, I own one short-term rental on Panther Pond. We've operated for many years, and overall, there's community members who are for it. There are community members who struggle with it. But ultimately, we follow the rules. We follow the process. We don't have police reports. We don't have septic issues. We're a brand new construction property, and I think it's critical for Raymond to maintain its vacation land stature of being in Sebago. So I think we've got to be very careful in ordinances like this of balancing what's effective for Raymond and for the state of Maine, while also making sure we are keeping some smart regulatory frameworks in place. As I look at the regulations as written, I think there's only a couple little things I'd tailor my feedback on. One is occupancy limits. I think when you get into hard numbers on occupancy limits, it becomes very complex to either shortchange or overchange properties. When you say 2 per bedroom, I think some of these bunk houses and bigger properties with big rooms, they can more than handle 2 in a bedroom. And does an infant count? Who's in diapers? Does a couple toddlers who aren't using a septic system count? How do we really balance that? So I think the idea of 2 per bedroom and only a bonus 2 is a bit subjective. I would personally recommend that it is a property by property basis, working with code enforcement, and you would apply for an occupancy number as a property, and working through that process that you would agree on what the right number is, because I think each property is unique depending on the house, the situation, the septic, and so on, and many other reasons. So I think that's kind of my biggest one of the biggest feedbacks to the proposed ordinance. Other than that, I think having some basic registration in place, I think we're not opposed. A lot of short-term rentals are not opposed to that. I think you need to be fair around punitive fees. And the other area I'd push on is complaints. we need to make sure that complaints are very carefully managed and this does not become a subjective reach out against short-term rentals, and that people are able to make arbitrary, unsubstantiated, unfair complaints that then create a perception that isn't accurate. So I think that's the other area I'd be very careful of, is how are we going to manage complaints, especially in these types of situations where it's highly subjective. So I think those are the two areas I would offer, and I can speak to this topic in great detail around other towns and other regulatory frameworks. So I'm happy to advise as well. But I'll pause there. Any questions, or is this just straight comment?
Hey, Mark, just one quick question on your occupancy. Would it be fair to leave it at 2 per bedroom as a standard, and then with an appeal process where you would then could bump it up to the occupancy number that would be in accordance with the septic?
Yeah, I think appeal is probably the strong word, but I'd say some sort of working process. I mean, we have a 4-bedroom, 4-bath house. It's brand new construction, 2 years old. We have an extra bedroom or 2 of septic in our design, so we're overbuilt for our septic. And we can host about 14 people comfortably in our property. We have a big bunk room, though, that has 3 twin beds and has a set of bunk beds. And that's typically where you get kids. You get 2, a generational family, maybe a grandparents, and then kids, and then, all the, 2 adult children, and then their families. And so you have this bunk room. And so I think that's the part that you got to be careful of, is our property can more than handle that septic. So we should really be in that 14 to, we'll call it 18 range if we want it to be. We really don't go that high. But in this scenario, we would be stuck at 10. And we can more than comfortably host more than 10. And again, I think that occupancy gets really complicated. What does an infant count as? What is a 2-year-old? Does that count against your occupancy? I mean, so I think there's got to be a little bit of give and take there. And I just also don't think it's that enforceable either. I mean, this is also an area where we can put whatever we want in an ordinance as a community, but then, and what my fear is, we're gonna have neighbors saying, oh, I saw 12 people versus you're only supposed to have 14, and you're average, we just have to avoid this kind of very he said, she said model.
Thanks, Mark.
As a point of order, does this go, how many rounds will this go? I know I wasn't on the beginning in public comment before Board of Select, before it moves to board.
We're not close. So we'll have another meeting, basically exactly like this one, with hopefully a little bit better draft. Again, open well before a public hearing, and then possibly the following month we may be able to get into the public hearing, but that would be most optimistic.
Cool. Thanks. Any other questions? We're not close. So we'll have another.
There's Bob too.
Was that me?
Yeah. It's an echo.
Oh, is my echo?
Yeah, you speak too loudly.
I mean, how would we go about, thinking about this and looking at, the kind of points a few people have made about, just our basic ordinances needing some beefing up. Are these things that we can do in conjunction with each other? Would it make more sense to focus on some of these items that are the hot topics and the problem areas, and focus on our ordinances that address those issues first before we try to put something else in place?
You're talking about the noise and the on-street parking?
On-street parking, noise, events, trash, occupancy limits. Are those things that we can address within our standard ordinances that already exist that would alleviate a lot of the issues we're trying to resolve with this?
On-street parking, we certainly can address. Noise, we have beat that one around and came up with no, but we certainly can look at it again. And I'm not sure we need something on trash town-wise.
What about events? I know I'm scared to even venture into this, but
I don't think, yeah, that, I don't think that's in the short-term rental world. the
No,
events.
I don't think it is either, but I think it is an area that maybe could be addressed, or that certainly seems to come up as a consistent issue, especially with some of these larger properties where,
We have addressed events already.
No, I was
We
just
not?
thinking it could be similar to like how this past round of ordinance changes, like we did with solar, providing more of an accurate definition for the different types of solar. It could be something as simple as looking at the land use ordinance, adding a definition of events or whatever.
Mass
gatherings, those kind of things. And then maybe adding, if it's permitted use in some zones, conditional use, prohibited, those kind of things. Like we can include that in maybe the next round for 2026.
yeah.
I like that. No, that will
That makes sense.
solve a lot of problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Things like that. And like, I know the community where I worked before, it was a very suburban town, but like their off-street parking standard was minimum 4 spaces per single family. Like standards like that could be incorporated in the land use ordinance as well. I'm not saying that's the right number, but
No, but that could
like
easily-
things like that, that could be incorporated in that round for discussion.
One thing about that, and I think maybe Peter brought it up, about the ADUs not requiring extra parking. In the last few years, the state has been passing laws that are kind of taking away some home rule, so we're not allowed to even put some of these ordinances in. I think it's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on. If they, there's one even that says maybe able to have 2 ADUs on a lot, and we wouldn't be able to stop that.
But
So
we could control the parking on the road, though.
Mm-hmm.
potentially, they're sometimes with the ADU, we can't require extra parking for an ADU
On the property.
on the property.
Right.
But if the parking, I think what you're saying, for the ADU rolls out into the road, you can't enforce that because that parking is for the ADU.
I mean, right, and we don't have anything, but I don't think we have an ordinance about blocking the road, which we definitely don't want to happen. That's,
Right.
that's a safety issue.
Right.
So, I think that's something that
I
needs to
think
be
we're on safe
weighed.
grounds there.
Yeah.
Keeping the road accessible.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I like that. That's the way to address it, I think.
Those, okay, so we do off-street parking, we do noise somehow, and we do event. As separate from our, and the definition is separate from our short-term rentals.
Yep.
And then the rest of the stuff with the short-term rentals, we just ignore it, just move forward, right? Is that okay with
That's
everybody?
not a problem. Problem solved.
All right, so how do we want to proceed? I think there's we had a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, we did.
We got to give, we can't just turn Brett loose, we got to give him some guidance on what we want in. and
Please.
what-
Right.
Yeah, and what makes sense to go in and what makes sense not to go in for a next draft.
I think we do kind of need to identify the difference between,
Commercial.
that the nature of the short-term rental. It's not,
Whether it's a business or a non-business, run as a business or
Yeah.
run as a non-business.
yeah. I mean, supplementing your taxes and supplementing, maintenance on your property and your income versus running it full-time year-round as a business that you
Right.
never reside in. Those are different.
Agreed. Anyone else
Yeah.
not disagree?
Oh, agree.
You agree? Agree? Okay.
Semi, I agree. Of course, it's me.
You.
Yeah.
Well,
It's,
All right.
it's just be careful.
It's
because
always
if
Well, let's let-
one is not occupied, the same amount as the other is unoccupied by the owner, then it's the same definition. It's a building being rented that is unoccupied by the owner.
Right.
It's the same exact definition, but we're going to divide it by how much, where the owner / business owner resides all year round versus where they reside all year round, if it's a Maine resident or if it's from New Jersey. So that's the difference I'm hearing, is if it's a corporation, no. But if it's somebody in Maine that doesn't live in that cottage, and only rents it for 6-7 weeks a year, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's just, that's where I go back to, I'm not sure if that's,
Let's see what Brett comes up with on this.
yeah, it's up to you, just figure it out. Yeah, so I just had that
why I'm
as
here.
one of
No
my
pressure.
my asterisk notes, is that, if any home not occupied by an individual must be owner occupied for 6+ months.
Right.
Sure, let's put that in there. So if somebody has a 7-story mansion, owner, if it's a business, needs to occupy it for 6 months somehow. That's what
Goes to the
that's what
residency.
changes it. That changes the residency. Like, yeah, so you're
Right.
a main resident. So that's how you can define that. And then that's the same treatment as the cottage.
Yep.
It's the same thing. Now we're apples to apples. So that would make sense to me.
In your draft here, though, under owner, under Section 2 definitions, this is from Raymond Land Use Ordinance, any person, firm, corporation, or other legal entity that controls a parcel of land for a fee or less than a fee title, or is party to a valid contract or option to purchase said title. That's the definition of owner.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, I'm going to work backwards, and you guys let me know what I don't mean to cut it off, but I don't want it could go on for a really long time. We have a lot of information here, and I don't want to lose any of it. So what I'm proposing is that we go through. I'm going to go through your comments. If I miss some, please, get my attention. The board then will kind of give Brett a little bit of guidance as to, we want you to figure out how to get that verbiage into the ordinance, or, that's something that we're going to leave for discussion for the next time. My plan has not changed from the last time, is that we're going to give Brett guidance on what we would like to see him get into an ordinance. He'll get that done probably in a couple of weeks. Right, Brett? He'll get it to Sandy. Sandy will get it up on the website, and I hope to have a duplicate meeting just like we just did next month, where again the board will work through what Brett has, and then we'll be looking for comments from the community as to what they think of those revisions as to which way we're going. And I hope that's okay. So if you do have some time to stick around, please do. And if when I get through to the end, if I've missed something that you think was important, please, I would appreciate you letting me know. So working backwards from my comments. I think the occupancy thing, I think what Mark said, I think we need to stick with the two per bedroom. And then the 2 bonus, I guess, we can discuss that. You can put it in there for now, but I think it's got to be limited to the septic. I don't think you can have bunk rooms only because the property is large enough that exceeds the septic system. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. That's there. The going back, the enforceable issue, that we're going to have to hold and see where we get to the end. But it's a big issue as to where we get the whole thing done and we don't get, and there's no way. So I think we do need to reach out to the sheriff's department and ask them, what their procedures are. Have you already done that? Anyone in the short-term rental group done that yet? Okay. So, Jay, could you kind of put that on your action item?
I'm writing it down.
Okay. The difference between long-term rentals and short-term rentals, that's an item on hold. I think we're going to wait until we can get short-term rentals done first. 7 weeks for seasonal property seems awfully fair to me. What do you think about that for the board? Anybody object to putting something like that in? Seasonal, a 7-week exemption by the proposed 30-day exemption. Mike, if you got something to say, please jump in.
Wouldn't we still want them to
Register.
register?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. So did you catch that, Brett? Am I going too fast?
You're doing
okay?
great.
All right. I think David's comments are pretty all straightforward. I don't think we need to go that. Thanks. If you're still here, thank you for those. We do need to get something in there advertising. Advertising's got to be in conformance with what the registration goes with, or whatever, how we want to approach that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? Parking, that's what we have to address parking separately. So I guess, I don't know how we would address parking in this particular ordinance without a parking ordinance.
No, I mean, there's a couple things we could do. I mean, we could refer to the land use ordinance if we do end up doing or implementing something within the next round of ordinance changes. I know one of the public comments that I had read suggested like a car to bed ratio or a car to bedroom ratio kind of thing that would be separate. So that's another avenue that we could explore as well. Or I imagine we probably want to have some standard based on the comment received tonight.
Oh yeah, we definitely want to have some comment. But I mean, and to Mark's and to the enforcement issue, if we don't have anything on parking as a issue in our ordinances, it's going to be hard to put one into the
right.
So I think we need to branch that off into two, or somehow address parking.
Sure.
Separately.
Yeah, I think we need to have something as safety, addressing parking. Take Egypt Road. There are no shoulders in Egypt Road. There should be no parking allowed at all on Egypt Road. So, and there are a lot of roads in the town that are like that. And that's a pure safety issue. It's not an annoyance issue, it's a safety issue. So I think we got to address that first.
That would be for all roads.
For all roads.
Yeah, for all roads, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unless there's an adequate off-road shoulder parking, it's restricted.
So all right, so the unit, what about a minimum of one off-street space per bedroom rented? Is that too much? Because it's you're providing one space per bedroom, and so if you have 4 bedroom, you need 4 spaces off the road.
Off the road. Oh, and then we don't need.
Then you don't need it. Yeah, you wouldn't need it because it would be the property owner's responsibility to create that parking space
On the property.
Yeah.
I like what you said.
Yep.
Some of these places might not be able to get 4 parking spaces. You're going to come into lot coverage issues with something like this. It's the nature of some of these smaller lots. It's going to be.
You could weigh this waiver.
Very
There's
difficult.
ways to, but if you have a 5-bedroom home, you should be able to.
We're going to probably have to allow parking on the grass. Type of thing. Park on the grass.
Sure. Yeah.
I
The
think that's gonna be
spaces.
They don't need to have.
care how the
they don't need to be
space-
gravel paved spaces. But they
again-
need to accommodate them on.
That's
on
right.
site.
Again, because it's not business.
Right.
It's not commercial zoning. So sure.
Whatever keeps them off the road.
That's right. It's their grass they can ruin.
Yeah. Not on the septic.
Right. Yeah. Leach field. Don't drive
We need a waiver section.
Sure.
Okay. And I think I heard, and I have it written down, David volunteered to hear all of those waivers. Yeah, I think you did say that. All right. Fee structure. That was in ours. It's in the proposed. We need to nail that cost down. I'm going to give that one to you.
Well, we'll see.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it should be that difficult. I mean, it's our time.
No,
Wayne's time.
Well, if they're going to have a septic inspection, that's going to be on them. That's not going to be the town's cost.
Right.
It's going to be going through and testing the smokes, making sure that egress windows, and it should be, unless there's some major violations, but And a house that's up to code, it shouldn't be
Should be no big deal.
much
yeah.
more than less than a certificate of occupancy or similar to that type of inspection.
Okay.
When you say up to code, the code.
At the time it was built.
So you're.
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
to address, it's going to be, smoke detectors and egress windows, where.
Yeah, we defined that, yeah.
Yeah, when the house got the C of O, I think that makes sense, unless they're doing a major renovation, maybe.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna meet code anyway.
Right.
I have two things on that. One thing that I'll probably do, just so the board's aware, is I'll probably refer back to the town's adopted fee schedule rather than outlining specific dollar amounts in here.
Great idea.
That way,
Yes.
in case it changes or goes up, whatever, we don't have to go through and change this whole ordinance.
Perfect.
Question I have is, would we want to format the fees to reflect the difference in like unhosted versus hosted?
Off the top of my head, I'd say
I think
no.
the select board will have to chime in on the fees.
Well,
I believe
yeah.
they set the fees, so, we can propose something.
Yeah, they can change it.
They can change it.
Yeah.
What about seasonal versus year-round, maybe, rather than that? Because if you're not renting it out in the, in the winter, if it's shut down and not usable in the winter.
So a fee schedule for the camp, basically seasonal camps.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be the same cost for
It's
the
the same
town.
cost for processing and administrative
Yeah.
You're right.
purposes, yeah.
All right, that's what I'm going to come back to. So, building codes, how the structure is used. I think we're going to address that with the business. Is that what you, Mike, is that what you? Yep, okay. Limiting stay, 3 days, a minimum of 3 days. One group per week. So it's not,
Maybe, I
Wanna
want to
come
make
back to it,
somebody
or-
have to rent 3 days, if they're coming up for a weekend, but maybe they can't rent more frequently than every 3 days? Like, maybe you can't.
so one rental per week, one group per week? No more than one group per week?
I don't know if I really even want to limit that. I don't know. That feels.
All right, I'm
If you look
circling
at it
this
for
one.
The reason of why they wanted it, it's people cycling in and out.
Right.
Oh. I was just trying to think of a way to do it without the limit, but.
That would be wildly outside the normal rental ordinances, like from other towns, like doing any sort of.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, doing any sort of, you can only rent it here but not there and this and that.
Yeah.
Platforms aren't built for this, like no other town is doing anything like this. People should be able to rent for whatever, however they'd like, within the normal compliance, but like it's very hard to say you can rent here but you can't rent there. I don't even think it's practically implementable from a system perspective. Just Airbnb and configuring those rules is just not normal. It would be my feedback.
So while you're there, Mark, do you, for your particular property, would it be financially feasible to roll people in and out every 3 days?
No. So our property, again, I'll just give you a perspective on ours.
Right.
We rent about 100 to 110 nights a year, 100 to 120 nights a year. We require a week-long minimum from the end of June through early September, with a Friday as our turn day. And then on the shoulder seasons, we are 3-day minimums. And no one is renting our house Tuesday to Friday in March. So we get weekend renters, and even in still February, March, April, we're pretty quiet, but we still get renters throughout the year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, October for leave. So people are coming, but it is a weekly business in the summer, and it is a weekend business. And I wouldn't call it business. I'd say rental market. The shoulders. And it is. We run it as a secondary source of income, but but the point is, you start messing with the platforms where people aren't going to be able to rent their property. They're going to have problems maintaining these rules. And if I wanted to rent it back to back, why not? Why can't I think why are we going to restrict someone who owns a house from the ability to rent their property because of someone else who doesn't own that house. I think we're really dabbling into people's land use rights here.
Okay, we're gonna circle that one.
It's really not enforceable either.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not gonna know. It's,
Oh,
and I don't think it's in their interest
All right.
to have the linens done every 2 days.
occupancy we've taken care of. This short-term rental in too many in one area. I mean, it makes sense in some respects, doesn't. Yet,
There are 200 short-term rentals in Raymond total per the data. So just be FYI. I mean, if you run AirDNA data, which is higher than I thought, to be honest, but there are only 200 rentals in totality in all of Raymond, according to AirDNA, which is one of the leading sources of short-term rental data. So I think any sort of restrictive occupancy on the amount gets into why can I do it, my neighbor can't, and I just think you're treading on thin ice. I don't think we have this problem either. I think we have a healthy amount of short-term rentals in Raymond, but it is a lake community for the past 200 years. I mean, its roots are in this business, so we're going to have a healthy amount of them, but it's never going to get too out of control, in my opinion.
Comment, Mr. Chairman, on this one.
are you frozen or are you back?
I think I'm back.
Okay.
Just a comment on, the numbers together. I'm not looking to limit it, but we gotta be cognizant of what that's doing to fire, EMS, and police access. So if we start having problems that way, we need to be able to address that. And that came up from one of the constituents.
Wait a minute, say that again, Wayne. What about?
So if you have a number of short-term rentals all together on one street.
Okay.
Street, we need to somehow be able to maintain emergency vehicle access throughout the street. So that might become an issue, just something to be aware of. That's something that I was thinking about when you were discussing this.
Okay.
But they won't be able to park on the street, so.
Right. So we're okay there. Cap on short-term rentals. I'm going to circle this unless anybody really is good. I'm circling that one. Give us something to talk about next time. We don't have to. Sorry. Good neighbor draft. Making something along the.
Can we just go back to one?
Once I go past it, got my.
Did you mean per owner, person, or?
What are we talking about?
Cap. Cap is maximum in town or per owner? Like if per.
Oh no, that's maximum for the town.
Can rent 3 buildings.
No, that was
out.
max
Okay.
rentals. Maximum 10% of rentals for the town.
So one corporation or one person can own 30.
Right. I think we all agree on the good neighbor draft and making that be posted. I mean, that's not a big deal, right? Yeah.
One idea that I had in
Put that
terms
in
of
there.
this one was on the actual registration application form that'll be made for this ordinance specifically, just including that with the application form. As they're filling it out, it's just including that documentation they should be already reading.
Perfect.
Could it be something that they kind of sign off on, like I certify to uphold these
Certainly
sort of
could.
standards?
Kind of like the shoreline zoning thing that
Yeah.
people sign when they sign. They
Yeah,
acknowledge that
at
they've
least
read it
something.
and they
Yeah.
understand the rules and they get it.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back, short-term rentals business, less than 30 days, no impact. One of the things early on, I forgot to write down the name. Somebody mentioned something about porta potties somewhere along the line.
It was
that
Mike.
Mike?
They were on the boundaries.
Yeah. I think that, if you got to have porta potties, I think that goes into event planning, not into your short-term rental.
Yeah, well, I think it questions again, what's the septic able to support? And if you have to have porta potties, then you're probably having more people than your septic can support.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Let's get
There's that, yeah.
somehow let's get
Events.
that in there that no can do. right? Agreed?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would think
yeah.
you would need, yeah, I would say,
Okay.
you know, to get a mass gathering permit or something along those
Right.
lines to be able to do something like that.
Okay, so on my little sketch here, the items that I said I was circling, they're not out. We're just going to kind of table them for discussion. Is there anything that I just mentioned, anything that I did not mention? That somebody said, hey, I said that, and you ignored me, which I sometimes tend to do. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just have a quick
You gotta,
Podium.
sorry. Quick and long questions, go to the podium.
Just a quick question as a point of information. What are the restrictions in Raymond? And I don't know. What are the restrictions for establishing a business in a residential neighborhood? And what defines a business in a residential neighborhood?
Okay, Jason.
Well, I think now we're getting, especially when it comes to rental, you know, what is a residence?
Well, no, I think you're just talking about whether or not you can hang a
Right,
shingle.
but when you're renting out a house, you know,
This is not a short-term rental
If
question.
somebody owns a home,
right,
but they never live there.
Right.
I mean, let's say they go to their home 6 days a year.
yeah.
And they spend the entire summer renting it. That clearly is using the house as a business, to me. Is that a business by your standards, or
No.
is that not?
It's not.
In what way is it residential?
Well, it's not in that we don't have an ordinance that says it is. So by default, it's not. I think that's how it works.
So
Yeah.
should
Right?
there,
I think you're right.
yeah, I mean, is that in the best interest of the neighborhood?
Oh, no, I don't think anybody agrees to that.
Yeah.
Maybe,
No,
not even Mark.
I mean, how do you regulate that?
Yeah, well, that's the issue.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
that's on a nutshell.
That's right, and that's what I was gonna speak up.
Yeah, I mean,
you
there's
you
no
can't
doubt
mandate
that-
somebody to be in their home to be a resident. I mean, if you're going to be less than 6 months,
So you're
not a
saying that they
resident of
can't be
Maine, but
unhosted?
It's then well, you're asking a business. The question is framed as a business. You're saying hosted. If it's their home and you own it, you're asking if somebody owns a home and they're only in it 6 weeks a year and they live elsewhere. That's someone's home. So if it's not run as a business, you can't define it as a business. There's no way to assign that.
Somebody can own a hamburger stand and not live there, and just because they own it doesn't mean that it's a residential.
On their property, yeah, they like hamburgers, and people stop by and buy them. They donate. So that's that fine line.
Right.
If you're not defining a business by yourself, if you don't have an LLC and you say like this is Home Away from Home LLC, then nobody can define that as a business. Only you can.
Okay.
So if you're renting, if you're only in your home for 2 weeks a year, then
You own the home for income purposes, period.
Sure. But if you're not,
Doesn't Raymond have a definition of a resident of Raymond? Isn't that, you're only allowed to vote as a resident of Raymond if you live in
6
Raymond?
months, is it?
6 months.
For 6 months?
Yeah, right.
So there is a legal definition of resident.
Sure, resident, Kevin, but not a homeowner. You don't need to live in your home
Well, but
for more than 6 months. to be a
we're
homeowner.
throwing around the term resident a lot versus homeowner.
Sure, that's accurate. Right.
Household.
Homeowner.
Building, yeah. Well, it's not your home.
That's right.
So I think we might want to clear up some of these definitions because they're kind of squishy.
Generally, owning a vacation rental is not a business in at least the vast majority of the U.S. No other ordinances in other towns, owning a vacation rental is a very common thing. It is considered passive income. It's not active income. It's you can't classify from an IRS perspective as active income, except under very detailed circumstances. So generally, owning a rental property, regardless of whether it's vacation or permanent and long term, is not what we would normally call a commercial business.
Well, I think we have to make that definition clear then because it's not real clear.
Yeah, again, I repeat that owning a vacation rental is passive income. You are not able to claim it as active income for most use cases unless it is your full-time job.
Well, that from Raymond's legal standpoint, though, we need to make a clarification whether that's true or not. It doesn't have to be true in Raymond. you know, as like you say, you can't vote in the Raymond election unless you live here as a resident for 6 months out of the year. So I think we need to make some clarifications on that.
Okay.
Bob, can I just say something real
You're
quick?
fast.
Jennifer Danzig, 38 Pulpit Rock Road. So I will just say, as an accountant, though, if you have a rental property, you are required to file a Schedule E on your 1040. So that is a business. You're also required, if you have a rental property, to pay what is, I think it's like 9% tax to the state of Maine. So it is a business. You can't say it's not a business when you're filing taxes.
Thank you. Okay, so back to my original question. I'm assuming the points addressed captured what mostly everybody is. Okay. Then, thank you for everybody for coming. You're welcome. Guess we'll see you all next month. I mean, you can stay. We're not adjourning, but you can stay. But we're done with the short-term rental discussions.
What's next?
With the marijuana. It could be. They go real fast.
Can I address one more thing?
What? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Under section 4F, it says signage and lighting.
Yeah.
I think it probably should say signage and signage lighting. That suggests lighting.
Oh,
of the
that's
whole
true.
house.
Yep.
It's a wordsmithing
Okay.
thing.
All right. How long is this going to take?
As long as you want. 10 minutes.
You can do it in 10 minutes?
Sure. I'm going to be very brief.
All right.
Yep, so.
You got 8 minutes.
So, yeah, I'll be 3 tops. I spoke with Vern Malik from the state.
Yeah.
He said that, we don't have to opt in to craft any ordinance. He says some towns actually, if they do put something on the books, they'll reference directly that the town does not opt into the state's program for any type of medical or adult use stores. He also said that, and I don't know if you guys got the legislation that's coming up. He said, that it's good that you might be addressing that because it's going to allow
Additional plats, right?
Right, go from 30 to 150. And that passed in committee 10-2. He expects it to pass the House and the Senate, but that remains to be seen. But certainly I'll be watching and see what happens with that. And he is willing to come down either through Zoom or in person and answer questions and help talk us through this. If that's what you guys want to do, I will definitely reach out and see if he can be present for that. Other than that, I think it kind of puts the ball in your court to see what, if anything, we want to do to craft an ordinance.
Okay.
I mean, I think I said last time, some towns have just single line, strictly prohibited, not allowed.
What's not allowed?
Outdoor cultivation.
Oh, yeah. Right.
You can do setbacks, you can say it also be enclosed.
Odor?
What was that?
The purpose of that is to control odor.
I imagine, like I said, like the one town just says strictly prohibited. Other towns do talk about, it has to be controlled and odor needs to be controlled.
I know Hollis does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An odor is a difficult thing to enforce again. If somebody's downwind of it all the time, they're going to smell it all the time. If they're upwind, they might smell it very rarely because outdoors, growing season isn't all year round, so there's only a window where it's going to be, there.
Would these count as outdoor? I mean, they're open on the ends, but they're buildings.
Rolling tunnels.
That's a
I mean,
one of those. Is that a greenhouse or not? Is it totally enclosed? And if it is totally enclosed in its structure, it needs to meet agricultural setbacks at the very least, which would be 50 feet.
yeah. I mean, somebody shouldn't be restricted to keeping their windows closed in their home because they can't stand the smell of something that's growing right outside, you know, at their neighbors.
Right, and if they're allowed to go from 30 to 150,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, that's a significant increase.
Yeah.
Significant.
Yeah.
It could be, I don't know, is it some sort of carbon filtration system? I mean, that's.
You'd have to enclose it.
Yeah,
And if it's all enclosed, that's fine, it just has to meet it'll have to meet the setbacks, and if they have it
Right.
enclosed and they have the
Yeah.
carbon scrubbers or whatever,
Right,
it
yeah, the
should be a
carbon
non-issue.
scrubbers. I think that should be part of the, the requirement.
Yep. I mean, that's kind of, I think,
You can
part
grow
of
what you want, again,
already.
your own land,
Yeah.
go back to that whole thing, it's freedom, you could do whatever you want. You should be able to do as much as you possibly can before taxation on your own land. But if it's gonna affect somebody else,
Right.
that's when you cross that line.
Can we limit them, instead of saying just no outdoor cultivation, can we limit it to?
Can we limit it? Do we
15
have any
plants?
agricultural zoning in town?
I'm sorry, I got two questions there.
Do Jackie first. Her question makes sense.
Do we have any zoning that's like agricultural in town?
We don't have an agricultural zone. Agriculture, we have a very short ordinance. I think there's 3 parts to it, and it just discusses farm animals, agricultural buildings like I referenced, and feedlots.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, there's definitely nothing, I don't know if the word cannabis or marijuana shows up in our ordinances.
We have it as a permitted use, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
So like to Jason's point, it could be something as simple as making it enclosed, has to meet agricultural setbacks, and then adding a performance standard where it has the carbon scrubbing or can of filter or whatever it's called. Adding that kind of standard on there.
I don't know if we can. Yeah.
It does, but does that mean that we opt in?
No.
No? Oh,
No.
Okay.
No. And we would clear, if anything we would get, I would definitely, talk to Vern.
Sure.
And make clear with him and make sure that it's going to be, because, and we, like I said, we can, right at the start, just say Raymond does not opt in. In that way, that kind of clears up any ambiguity there right off the bat. And I think, Bob, you were asking if we could restrict the number of plants. I'm just guessing here, but I would say no.
Okay.
I think that's going to be a state thing.
So it's all or none?
Right. It's all or none. And then we can decide if you want to restrict it, what you do about the personal use, the 3 per, adult resident at the house. I don't know if that would be an exemption that we'd want to put in there for that, because.
And those could be outdoor?
Those could be outdoors.
Okay.
Just
That's fine.
for
Okay.
the layman,
I guess that's what I was just getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
That makes sense. Yeah. What do you think? We're getting too much done tonight. So, how much time you got this month?
As much time as you need. No, again, I think, like Jason and I, we looked at this earlier today, like in the land use ordinance where it goes through like the different performance standards for different uses, and we could probably just add a new one right after solar. I think that was the most recent one that was added. Just add a new one for outdoor cultivation, stayed in there, we're not opting in, and then adding the performance standards for the enclosed structure, setbacks, and filters.
Okay.
I think it's that easy.
Yes? Yes?
Yeah.
Kevin?
There's a hand up over there.
Well, yeah, we're not doing public hearing on this one, though.
Okay.
What exactly does opt-in cause to happen with us?
A lot. We have to regulate
should be
everything.
mass.
We would have to allow storefronts. We have 2 storefronts because they operated before, I think it's December 1st, 2018.
Oh, okay.
So they're kind of grandfathered in. We don't allow any more of those. It mostly revolves around storefronts, but you have to have a whole bunch of ordinances that kind of encapsulates everything that's going to comes with that.
All right, so if you have time, as third priority, short-term rental first, the parking, and, we haven't done noise. We'll work on that next time.
I think there was a
There's a
draft
state-
noise that I had prepared for last round, so
Yeah, I
I have
think
to
you did.
reinvent the wheel there.
Okay.
But,
All right, so we'll do so parking, the noise, short-term rental, and if you can get to a draft for what we're thinking about for the marijuana.
Sure. And I'll
Do
also
that.
throw in events and mass gatherings, at least a definition that we can include in the ordinance.
Perfect.
So,
Yep.
cool.
Put that after the marijuana, though. because the marijuana thing was given to us by the.
And do we want Vern to come to this next meeting, or
No.
we'll wait?
No, 'cause I
if we
think the
want
next
him-
meeting is going to be relatively long with the short-term rentals.
Yeah.
We'll do the public here, we'll do a public comment on the marijuana, and then we'll roll forward from there.
Yep.
Okay, does that make sense to everybody? You're up next. Is there a second? No one wants a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Now we're done.
Aye.